Ours has been a singular trajectory to follow Jesus. This is our history and our present passion. We are the merging of many traditions and various denominations. This is the story of the Evangelical Missionary Church of Canada. The EMCC has had many influences, stretching back as far as the 1500s with Menno Simons of our Anabaptist tradition, and the early Methodist movement of the 1700s, inspired by John and Charles Wesley and George Whitefield. In the late 1700s, Jacob Albright, a farmer and tile maker from Pennsylvania, suffered the loss of several of his children due to an epidemic. This tragedy prompted a search for hope and comfort that he found in Jesus. In 1785, he dedicated his life to preaching the good news. He became the leading figure of a revival movement that inspired the birth of the Evangelical Church. In the 1860s, revival meetings were held by Albright's Association in Port Elgin, Ontario. Solomon Eby, an elder of a Mennonite congregation, attended. His heart was stirred with new zeal for the Lord and a new sense of joy in the Spirit of Jesus. Following his conversion, his preaching called for a tangible religious experience. By 1874, he and other like-minded preachers, such as Daniel Brenneman of Indiana, were no longer welcome in their Mennonite conferences. By 1883, various Anabaptist clusters of similar persuasion had amalgamated to become the Mennonite Brethren in Christ. Their name was changed to United Missionary Church in 1947 to broaden their reach. A merger with the Missionary Church Association in 1969 brought about the Missionary Church, a founding stream of EMCC. Meanwhile, in 1946, the Evangelical Church joined forces with the United Brethren in Christ to form the Evangelical United Brethren, or EUB. In 1968, the EUB Church in the USA joined forces with the Methodists to become the United Methodists. Since the Methodists in Canada had already been amalgamated into the United Church in 1925, the Ontario EUB Conference joined the United Church. The Western Canadian Conference of EUBs stayed out of the merger and continued as the Evangelical Church. Founding mothers of our movement, ministering sisters, were women like Janet Douglas, who at the age of 23 rented a small hall in the city of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and began preaching. She inspired other young women to follow in her footsteps. From 1884 to 1949, these women made many visits to local saloons, held prayer meetings and children's meetings, shared the good news, and saw many begin to follow Jesus. When the forerunners of the missionary church began to expand into Alberta and workers were few, ministering sisters, or deaconesses, played a critical role as pastors. The Evangelical Church and the Missionary Church both took seriously Jesus' command to make disciples of all nations. The first overseas missionary in the Evangelical Church was Sebastian Kurz, who in 1845 traveled to Germany. His stories of what Jesus was doing among the people there eventually inspired his church back home. In 1850, a board of missions was established. In the years to follow, missionaries were sent to Japan, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Turkey, Spain, and Liberia. Eusebius Hershey was the first missionary of the Missionary Church. He set sail for Liberia in 1890 at the age of 67. After 6 months overseas, he passed away from malaria. Eusebius's desire to follow Jesus, no matter where it took him, inspired others. Throughout the 19th and early 20th century, the Evangelical Church and Missionary Church followed similar streams. Both denominations held camp meetings and eventually purchased camps so they could continue to inspire future generations to follow Jesus. Both denominations also began colleges for higher learning in order to better equip their members to serve as leaders, pastors, and missionaries. In 1970, the Evangelical Church in Canada was granted autonomy from its American affiliates. Similarly, in 1988, the Missionary Church in Canada gained independence from her sibling in the United States. What could be accomplished if these two groups combined their strengths? The Evangelical Church, with its roots in Methodist teaching and belief in the power of the Spirit, with the Anabaptist roots and powerful missionary history of the Missionary Church. In August 1993, they merged to become the Evangelical Missionary Church of Canada, EMCC. Today, the EMCC has churches stretching from British Columbia to Nova Scotia and missionaries serving in more than 25 countries. And our story is far from over. Across Canada and around the world, we are following Jesus together.